Monaco was supposed to be a sanctuary, a place of profound healing and romantic reconnection for Steffy Forrester Finnegan and her husband, John Finnegan. Instead, the picturesque French Riviera transformed into the ultimate backdrop for a devastating psychological thriller, courtesy of the relentless and delusional Sheila Carter. When Steffy discovered that her mother-in-law had secretly stalked them across the globe and that Finn had actively concealed her presence on his commercial flight, the betrayal shattered her completely. Fleeing the principality in a haze of trauma, Steffy vanished into the night, leaving a frantic Finn and an enraged Ridge Forrester in her wake. It was in this moment of sheer, blinding panic that Ridge reached for his phone, sending an urgent, desperate message across the ocean to his eldest son. That single notification was all it took to awaken a dormant protector and shift the entire landscape of Los Angeles. For months, Thomas Forrester had been living abroad, distancing himself from the toxic corporate wars and emotional entanglements of his past. Since December of the previous year, he had buried himself in his work, trying to forge a new path away from the shadow of his history with Hope Logan. But the moment his phone screen illuminated with his father's urgent message, the sophisticated European facade crumbled instantly, revealing the fiercely protective, primal brother beneath. The very mention of Sheila Carter's name in proximity to his sister was enough to ignite a firestorm in his veins. Thomas knew the horrific history all too well. He vividly remembered the agonizing hours spent in the hospital waiting room after Sheila had gunned down Steffy and Finn in that dark alleyway. Without a second thought, Thomas abandoned his current life, immediately chartering a private jet back to California. The hours spent suspended in the air over the Atlantic Ocean were sheer torture for the Forrester heir. Isolated in the cabin of the private jet, Thomas was a prisoner to his own dark thoughts and escalating fury. He paced the narrow aisle, his mind replaying every instance where Finn's misguided compassion for his biological mother had placed Steffy in mortal danger. Thomas had tried to be supportive of the marriage, tried to believe that Finn was the ultimate safe haven for his sister. But this latest revelation, that Finn had actually struck a secret bargain with the devil herself while midair, was an unforgivable treason. In Thomas's eyes, Finn was no longer a victim of Sheila's manipulation. He was an active participant in Steffy's trauma. The anger brewing within Thomas was not just protective. It was visceral, ancient, and deeply rooted in the Forrester family's long-standing war against the woman who had terrorized them for decades. When the jet finally touched down on the tarmac in Los Angeles, Thomas did not bother checking in at Forrester Creations. He did not care about the catastrophic public relations nightmare surrounding Hope Logan's defection to Katie's rival fashion house, nor did he care about Eric Forrester's highly anticipated haute couture collection. There was only one destination burned into his mind: the Cliff House. The stunning oceanfront property, once a symbol of Steffy and Finn's enduring love and resilience, now felt like a crime scene waiting to be investigated. Thomas drove with reckless determination, his knuckles white as he gripped the steering wheel, his jaw clenched so tightly it ached. The crashing waves of the Pacific Ocean seemed to mirror the violent tempest raging inside his chest. He was a man on a singular mission, driven by a blood oath to protect his family at all costs. Meanwhile, inside the silent, echoing walls of the Cliff House, John Finnegan was a man entirely consumed by his own catastrophic failures. Having just rushed back from Monaco on a commercial flight in a desperate bid to save his marriage, Finn was drowning in an ocean of guilt, regret, and self-loathing. Ridge's explosive, paternal rage on the French Riviera still echoed in his ears, a constant reminder of the safety he had stripped away from his wife. Finn looked at the empty spaces in the home, the discarded remnants of their life together, and felt the crushing weight of his monumental mistake. He had genuinely believed that by keeping Sheila's presence a secret, he was protecting Steffy from unnecessary anxiety. He had foolishly thought he could manage the monster. Now, his wife was missing, wandering the world with a shattered heart, and it was entirely his fault. Finn was a broken man, sitting in the shadows, waiting for a punishment he knew he richly deserved. The heavy, suffocating silence of the Cliff House was violently shattered when the front door flew open, hitting the wall with a deafening crack. Thomas Forrester stormed into the living room, his eyes blazing with an unholy, righteous fury. He did not knock, and he did not announce himself. He moved with the predatory grace of a wolf cornering its wounded prey. Finn, startled from his despair, stood up, his exhausted, tear-stained face a stark contrast to Thomas's immaculate, terrifying rage. For a long, agonizing moment, the two men simply stared at each other across the room. The air crackled with hostility, thick enough to choke on. Thomas took in the sight of the doctor, the man who was supposed to be Steffy's ultimate shield, and felt nothing but absolute, unadulterated disgust. Thomas's voice was dangerously low, a lethal whisper that cut through the tension like a serrated blade as he demanded to know where his sister was. Finn swallowed hard, his voice trembling as he admitted the agonizing truth that he simply did not know. The admission was the spark that ignited the powder keg. Thomas closed the distance between them in 3 long strides, his face inches from Finn's. The sheer incompetence radiating from Finn was more than Thomas could bear. He began to systematically tear down every defense the doctor had ever built, attacking his character, his judgment, and his worthiness as a husband. Thomas accused Finn of being a profound failure, a man who had allowed a psychotic murderer to repeatedly infiltrate their lives and destroy Steffy's sense of security. Finn tried to defend himself, his voice cracking with desperation as he explained the impossible situation on the airplane. He pleaded that he was trying to protect Steffy, that he had made a deal to keep Sheila away. But Thomas was not interested in excuses. He saw right through the pathetic rationalizations. Thomas roared that Finn had protected the very woman who had shot them and left Steffy for dead in an alley. He accused Finn of always choosing Sheila, claiming that the inherent darkness was embedded in his DNA. Thomas hit the deepest, most agonizing nerve, weaponizing Finn's biological connection to Sheila. He framed the Finnegan bloodline as a toxic curse that would inevitably destroy everything it touched. It was a cruel, calculated psychological strike, designed to strip Finn of any remaining dignity and expose his deepest insecurities. The accusation of sharing Sheila's darkness was too much for Finn to bear. The guilt that had been quietly suffocating him suddenly morphed into a defensive, desperate anger. Finn shouted back, his fists clenching at his sides as he declared his love for Steffy and his absolute devotion to their family. But Thomas merely laughed, a cold, hollow sound devoid of any humor. Thomas retorted that Finn had only given Steffy a lifetime of looking over her shoulder, a lifetime of severe trauma. He branded Finn a liability, a Trojan horse that had brought the ultimate monster back into their gates. The verbal sparring had reached its absolute limit. There were no more words left to say, no more logic to be reasoned with. The atmosphere in the room had become completely untenable, a pressure cooker of masculine pride, protective instinct, and profound betrayal. The transition from verbal assault to physical violence was instantaneous. Thomas, blinded by his protective rage, lunged forward, grabbing Finn by the collar of his shirt and slamming him violently against the nearest wall. The impact rattled the framed photographs hanging nearby, sending one crashing to the hardwood floor in a shower of shattered glass. Finn, initially stunned by the sheer force of the attack, tried to push Thomas away, but the Forrester air was fueled by a terrifying adrenaline. Thomas spat that Finn was never going to hurt his sister again, delivering a vicious punch to Finn's jaw. The doctor stumbled backward, tasting blood, the physical pain a shocking manifestation of the emotional agony he had been enduring for days. What followed was a brutal, chaotic brawl that tore through the pristine elegance of the Cliff House. Finn, realizing that Thomas was not going to stop, finally fought back. The two men grappled, crashing over the designer furniture, knocking over lamps and shattering decorative vases. It was not a clean or calculated fight. It was a messy, visceral expression of profound family trauma. Thomas fought with the desperate ferocity of a brother who had almost lost his sister to a bullet, while Finn fought with the panicked energy of a man watching his entire world slip through his fingers. Every punch thrown was laced with years of suppressed tension, every shove a physical representation of the massive divide between the Forrester legacy and the Finnegan reality. The violent chaos was suddenly interrupted by the frantic sound of the front door opening again. Taylor Hayes, having received a panic call from Ridge, who was still coordinating efforts from abroad, rushed into the house. The renowned psychiatrist froze in absolute horror at the sight before her. Her son and her son-in-law, battered and bleeding, were locked in a vicious struggle amidst the wreckage of the living room. Taylor screamed for them to stop, her voice piercing through the haze of masculine rage. She rushed forward, disregarding her own safety, and physically inserted herself between the two men, pushing Thomas back with all the strength she could muster to prevent further bloodshed. Simultaneously, Taylor's phone, which was clutched in her hand, blared with the voice of Ridge Forrester on speakerphone. Ridge's authoritative, booming voice filled the room, carrying the distinct echo of a man screaming from an airport terminal. He demanded that Thomas stand down, reminding his son that beating Finn to death was not going to find Steffy. The combined presence of his mother and the commanding voice of his father finally managed to break through the red mist clouding Thomas's vision. He stepped back, his chest heaving as he gasped for air, his knuckles bruised and bleeding. Finn slumped against the wall, wiping a smear of blood from his split lip, his eyes hollow and utterly defeated by the physical and emotional onslaught. Taylor turned to Thomas, her eyes pleading as she urged him to focus on finding Steffy rather than destroying each other. But Thomas, though physically separated from Finn, remained entirely unyielding. He looked at his mother, his expression hardening into a mask of absolute, terrifying resolve. He pointed a trembling, accusatory finger at the doctor, his voice dropping to a deadly, resonant octave. Thomas declared with absolute certainty that the marriage was over. He swore a solemn vow that he would never let his sister endure another second of torment from Finn, Sheila, or the cursed Finnegan bloodline. He demanded that Finn stay far away from Steffy, cementing his role as the ruthless gatekeeper of his sister's safety. The silence that followed Thomas's declaration was deafening. It was a vow made with absolute certainty, a promise of eradication that chilled everyone in the room to the bone. Taylor looked at her son, recognizing the dangerous, obsessive glint in his eye, a trait he had fought so hard to overcome, now fully resurrected in the name of family protection. Ridge's voice on the phone had gone quiet, perhaps realizing that his son had just articulated the exact sentiments he himself harbored but had not yet acted upon. The Cliff House, once filled with the laughter of Hayes and Kelly, now felt like a mausoleum, a monument to a love story that had been fatally poisoned by secrets and the lingering specter of Sheila Carter. The suffocating family atmosphere left no room for negotiation or forgiveness. What made the entire violent spectacle so profoundly tragic was the sheer irony of the situation. While Thomas and Finn were destroying each other and the Cliff House in the name of Steffy's safety, they were completely oblivious to her actual whereabouts. Steffy was not wandering the dangerous streets of Monaco, nor was she in the clutches of Sheila Carter. At that very moment, Steffy was sitting in the dimly lit executive office of Forrester Creations in downtown Los Angeles. She was heavily intoxicated, drowning her severe PTSD and marital sorrow in endless glasses of alcohol, accompanied by an equally devastated Carter Walton. The physical proximity of her location, just miles away from the brutal brawl, highlighted the profound breakdown of communication and trust within the entire family network. As Thomas finally turned on his heel and stormed out of the ruined Cliff House, leaving Finn to bleed amidst the wreckage, the power dynamics of the Forrester family underwent a seismic shift. Thomas's return to Los Angeles was not just a brief visit, it was a declaration of martial law. He had positioned himself as the ultimate authority over Steffy's life, a role he intended to enforce with ruthless efficiency. The physical altercation with Finn was merely the opening salvo in what promised to be a devastating war for the soul of the Forrester family. With Hope Logan's recent defection already tearing the corporate side of their lives apart, Thomas's aggressive intervention on the personal front guaranteed that no one would escape the impending fallout. For Finn, the physical blows delivered by Thomas would heal in a matter of days, but the psychological scars inflicted during that confrontation would last a lifetime. Thomas had vocalized the deepest, darkest insecurity that had plagued Finn since the day he discovered his true parentage, the fear that he was inherently broken, tainted by the very blood that pumped through his veins. As Finn slid down the wall, burying his face in his hands, he realized that he was fighting a war on two fronts. He had to somehow save his wife from her own trauma and the allure of whatever dark path she was currently walking, while simultaneously battling a family that had fundamentally decided he was the ultimate enemy. The road to redemption, if it even existed, was paved with insurmountable obstacles. Taylor, left standing in the debris, slowly approached Finn. Despite her maternal instinct to comfort the wounded, she could not bring herself to offer him absolution. Steffy's pain was too raw, the danger too real. In a quiet, devastating whisper, Taylor admitted that Thomas was right. She told Finn that he had compromised Steffy's safety, and for that, she did not know if their family could ever forgive him. With that final, crushing judgment, Taylor turned and walked out of the house, leaving John Finnegan entirely alone in the ruins of his life, bracing for the inevitable moment when Steffy would finally be found and the true reckoning would begin.